शान्तरूपं भक्तानुकम्पा धृतविग्रहैवै ईशावतारं परमेशमीड्यं तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामि तं रामकृष्णं शिरसा नमामि. Salutations to Sri Ramakrishna, the immensely compassionate manifestation of the Lord. Dear friends, today's special topic is on the life of a very unique and awe-inspiring devotee whom we come across in the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. Her name is Aghormani Devi, and the talk will be delivered by Sukalyan Sengupta, a long-time member of the Vedanta Society and also a professor at UMass Dartmouth. So let's welcome Professor Sukalyan Sengupta.
Thank you, Shravani, and happy Halloween. As Shravani said, we have got a chance to look at the life of a very special disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Special because, number one, she is one of the very few female disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. Number two, she lived a long life, she had extensive interaction with Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother Sarada Devi and Swami Vivekananda and Sister Nivedita. So a very rare combination that way. Then if we look at the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna, to each disciple, his way of instruction, his way of spiritual instruction was unique. So when we look at Aghormani Devi, we find some glimpses that we don't find anywhere else. But finally, I think, most importantly, we should look at her life because she is the exemplar of bhakti. I mean, as you have read in the Gospel, Sri Ramakrishna says that many times that for this age, for this Kali Yuga, bhakti is the best path. And in the bhakti tradition, when we look at the Vaishnava tradition, there are 5 moods or bhavas that we associate with. There is this madhur bhav, where you take the attitude of a devotee who is in the quietness and stillness in the presence of the Lord. Then you have sakhya bhav, which is the attitude of a devotee towards a friend. Dasya bhav, where you take the attitude that you are a servant of the divine. Then madhur bhav, where the attitude is that you and the Lord are connected as a lover is connected to the beloved. And the vatsalya bhav, where the attitude is that of a mother towards a child. So Aghormani Devi is an exemplar of this vatsalya ras bhav. And as we go along this talk, I hope you will get a flavor of that. Just some very brief biography. She was born in 1822. So as you know, Sri Ramakrishna was born in 1836, so 14 years elder to him. We don't know much about her early life, except that she was married at the age of 9. In those days, in the mid-19th century, it was common. She came from a Brahmin family. It was common in Hindu society to be married that young. Though you can't really call it marriage. I mean, it was more of a betrothal in the sense that it was kind of a solemn promise for marriage, because at the age of 9, you can't really expect the girl to be mature enough into the marriage. So the tradition was there would be a ceremony, and after that the girl would come back to her parents' house, and then later on, once she attained puberty, she would go to her in-laws' house. But in the case of Aghormani Devi, something very tragic happened. She, in fact, saw her so-called husband only once in her lifetime, that too at that marriage day or that betrothal day, because soon after the husband died. So again, at that time, the Hindu society had regressed to such a level that even though this was not a proper marriage, she was considered a widow. And not just a widow, she was just a child, 13, 14 years old. So a child widow, Bal Vidhava is the Sanskrit term. And the position of that kind of a person in the society is not very good. So she had to bear the brunt of that unfortunate tragedy. But in a way, I think it was a blessing, as perverse as it may sound, because she, from the very childhood, was very devotional in nature, and this, in a way, freed her from all those responsibilities of being a wife or a mother and all that. So her brother, Neel Madhov, he was a priest, and one of the places he was a priest at was in a temple which was very close to her house. This is called the Radha Madhav temple in Kamarhati. Kamarhati is about 4 or 5 miles north of Dakshineshwar and about maybe 15 miles north of Calcutta. So when we read the kind of history of Bengal or Calcutta at that time, what had happened was that there is this so-called Battle of Plassey in 1757, which basically brought in the East India Company as the ruler, even though it was not part of the British Empire, but the East India Company started to rule. And then Calcutta became the capital of this East India Company. So Calcutta gained a lot of importance. And so there was a lot of business, a lot of activity. So some people, they got rich very fast. And this nouveau riche class, some of them, what they did is they built these, what we call today as garden houses. These are typically on the banks of the Ganga, a little bit of suburb of Calcutta, where the landlord would retreat during the weekends. But we have to face it, they retreated in the weekends basically for their licentiousness and debauchery. So, when we read about those times, it's a very large segment of the nouveau riche class indulging in that. But then there were some who were more or less the opposite, in the sense that they did make a lot of money very fast, but they were very devotional in nature, so they built temple houses. And one of these persons of the latter class was Govinda Chandra Datto of Potoldanga. He, with his money that he made, he built a beautiful temple complex in Kamarhati on the banks of the Ganga. And after his death, his wife, his widow, she kind of moved to that place permanently. She was also of a very devotional nature, so she made that her home. And fortuitously, Neel Madhov, Aghormani Devi's brother, he knew this lady, so stars got aligned. This lady, Govinda Chandra Datto's widow, she agreed or invited Aghormani Devi to be her companion at this temple complex. And that was the best news for Aghormani Devi, because as we have said, she was very devotional in nature. She was finding it difficult to kind of intensify her practices in her brother's house or in her parents' house. So it's beginning of 1850s, one can say. She moves into this house, and this house is, this is a very old picture, dilapidated now, but it was a very beautiful house on the banks of the Ganga. So she moves in here, and she starts, or she intensifies a routine which would become punishing to a certain degree. What was the routine? She would wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, 2 o'clock, as we all know, is kind of very, very early. In fact, when we read the biographies of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, we don't really see anybody waking up that early. But I would have to qualify this statement. Anybody except Latu Maharaj, Swami Adbhutananda. Swami Adbhutananda beat Agharmoni Devi because he never slept at night. We know this story that once Latu Maharaj, he came to the Dakshineshwar temple, and the plan was that after dinner, after a little bit of rest, they would start spiritual practices. But Latu Maharaj was fast asleep. It took a lot of effort on the part of Sri Ramakrishna to wake him up. So Sri Ramakrishna admonished him, said, well, this is the time for spiritual practices and you're wasting your time sleeping. And that one single admonition pretty much made Latu Maharaj take a vow that he would never again sleep in the night. He did rest for a few hours during the day, but not in the night. But, okay, leaving that aside, so wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, freshen up, and then at 3 o'clock, she would sit down to do her japam. She was extremely, extremely rigorous about japam. And in our bhakti tradition, there is a phrase that we use, japat siddhi. That means if somebody does japam on a very regular basis for a long time, that person attains perfection. So, Agharmoni Devi, we don't know where exactly. Most of the biographers believe that she was initiated into the Gopal Mantram in her in-laws' place. So, she would start this japam of this Gopal at 3 o'clock in the morning, uninterrupted for the next 5-6 hours. Then she would take a bath in the Ganges, go to the temple complex, clean the complex a bit, and then gather firewood and dried leaves. Why? She was actually extremely, extremely poor. Her savings were so minuscule that managing even her frugal lifestyle, as frugal as it was very difficult. So she could not buy firewood. She had to collect firewood. She would go into the nearby gardens, collect dried wood and leaves, and that will then enable her to make a fire. So she would then cook, and her meal, the lunch, was again, let's take a look at her lunch. It was rice, boiled potatoes, boiled dal, legumes, and boiled bitter gourd. And that's it. So, and this she would prepare, and after she would prepare, she would then offer it to the Lord, the Naivedyam, and then partake of it. So with this lunch, after this lunch, a little bit of rest. In the afternoon, again, she would go to the temple, do a little bit of japam and meditation, then prepare for the Vesper service. And after Vesper service, she would come back to her room, again start another session of japam and meditation, which would go late into the evening, at the end of which she would take just a little bit of milk and some dried fruits, narkol nadu in Bengali. Basically, you take shredded coconut and then you mix it with molasses or sugar syrup, and then you let it to dry. So it's a dry sweet. That means it stays long. It doesn't get stale. So that after having that would be she would retire. So you can see what a punishing schedule she maintained. And she maintained this not for a few days, not for a few weeks, not for a few months, not for a few years, not for a few decades, even for at least 3 decades or more. So now we come to 1884, and as Shravani said, you can say one of the major pieces of this divine Leela, divine play we see, and that is, this is 1884 fall. Her landlady, Govinda Datta's widow, and they had heard of Sri Ramakrishna. They had heard of this saint in the temple garden of Dakshineshwar. So they wanted to pay him a visit. So one afternoon, since both are on the Ganga, they took a boat. By boat, it was about 3 miles. So they came to the Dakshineshwar temple. They met Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna received them very warmly, had extended conversations about the Bhagavatam, and at the end of which, when they were about to leave, he said, please come again. And now, last 2 weeks we heard Prithvish talk about M, and Prithvish recounted that, well, when M first came to the Dakshineshwar temple, he came with Siddheshwar. And biographers, they say, to the best of our knowledge, Siddheshwar never came back to the Dakshineshwar temple again. Same in this case. Gobindo Datta's widow, we never have any record of her coming back to the Dakshineshwar temple again. But Aghormoni Devi, the moment she stepped out of that Dakshineshwar temple complex, she was kind of attracted like a magnet. So, but she resisted herself. Few days passed by. The pull got so strong that she decided to again visit the Dakshineshwar temple. This time she could not afford a boat. She could not afford a horse carriage, so she walked. It's about 5 miles by road. So she walked, and the custom is, it was much more prevalent then, and maybe even so now, is that when you go to meet a saint, you don't really go empty-handed. So Aghormoni Devi, we have seen, she was extremely, extremely poor. So all she could afford was a very inferior quality of a sweet. It's called Dedo Sandesh in Bengali, a very inferior quality for a few pennies. That's all she could afford. So that's what she bought. And then she came to the temple complex. So she enters Sri Ramakrishna's room, and there are other people sitting there. The moment Sri Ramakrishna sees her, she says, "Oh, you have come." And then he says, "Well, what did you bring for me? Please give it to me." And this lady, you can imagine, she's so embarrassed. She has this inferior quality sweet, but Sri Ramakrishna's personality is such that she has in a knot in her sari, so she unties. And the moment Sri Ramakrishna sees this sandesh, he just kind of grabs it, eats it. He says, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is wonderful." And then comes the most interesting part. He says, "Well, why did you have to spend money buying this sweet? Why don't you bring, let's say, coconut balls from your home? Or better still, why don't you cook something?" Now, keep in mind, this is just the second visit of them. And what to cook? This is, I will first read it out in Bengali and then I'll try to translate, because in a way it's untranslatable. He says, "যা তুমি নিজের হাতে রাঁধবে লাউ শাক চচ্চড়ি আলু বেগুন বড়ি দিয়ে সজনে খাড়ার তরকারি তাই নিয়ে আসবে তোমার হাতের রান্না খেতে বড় স্বাদ হয়." So he's giving very, very specific demands. You should make this chachuri, which some people have translated it as dry curry. It's not really a good translation, but we don't have a very good translation. This dish, and you make it with potatoes and with eggplants and with drumsticks, and in this particular way. I have a very strong desire to eat food cooked by you. Now, Aghormoni Devi is crestfallen. I mean, she is disillusioned, dispirited. She thought she went to see a sadhu, and all this sadhu talks of is food, first time, second time. So she says, "I'm not coming back again. This is just not working." So she steps out, and again, this is her recounting. She says, "The moment I step out of the temple garden, it's as if somebody is pulling me inside." So she resists, but can resist only a few days. So she cooks something, comes again, walks this 5 miles, comes to the Dakshineshwar temple, gives it to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna says, wow, the moment he eats it, he says, "Shudha, Shudha," it's just like nectar. So he's very, very happy. And again he says, "Please come repeatedly and also bring all this stuff, good stuff, repeatedly." So she's again disillusioned but cannot resist. So things go on like this for a few months. By this time, she is also introduced to the Holy Mother. So she has befriended Holy Mother. And again, we don't know the exact dates, but about 6 months later, this is the most intense part of the Divine Leela. About 6 months later, Aghormoni Devi is in her room, in this room, And by the way, this room has some connection to today's date. We'll talk about that a little later. So she's in her room, starts japam at 3 o'clock in the morning, as for 50 years she has done. And after a few hours, she's in her japam, she sees Sri Ramakrishna seated on the floor to her left. And she is dumbstruck. How could Sri Ramakrishna come at this time? And she has no clue. But the experience is so strong that she tries to grab Sri Ramakrishna's hand. And the moment she tries to grab it, that figure transforms into Gopal. And this is baby Gopal Krishna. I mean, Gopal, the Sanskrit etymology means cowherd. This is an epithet of Krishna, child Krishna. So she sees Gopal. And this Gopal is not an image. This Gopal is kind of walking in her room. And the mythology of Sri Krishna as a child is that he loved butter. And so he would ask for butter from Yashoda and wherever he would go. So this Gopal is the same. He's asking Aghormani Devi, give me noni butter. And Aghormani Devi says, you see, I am a miserable, poor old lady. Where can I get butter from you? She's trying to convince him, but nothing works. So it's come to such a stage that she's kind of lost what to do. And when you are lost in spiritual realm, then what do? Well, you go to your guru. So she decides to go to her guru. And just now imagine this, just envision this scenario. She says, I grabbed Gopal, I put him on my shoulder, one arm resting on his buttocks. This Gopal is now resting on my shoulder, and the Gopal's face and my chin, they are now joined. And like this, she walks this 5 miles to Dakshineshwar temple, crying out, Gopal, Gopal. And you can just imagine what the ordinary people, what experience they are having. They cannot see Gopal. But she is not only is she seeing Gopal, she is walking as if this Gopal is with her. And this way, she walks this 5 miles and comes to the Dakshineshwar temple. At that time, in the temple, Golapma, another of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples, she was in Sri Ramakrishna's room. She was actually cleaning the room. So let us see what she says. She says, this is Golapma. She says, I was then cleaning the master's room. It was 7 or 7:30 in the morning. In the meantime, I heard somebody calling, Gopal, Gopal, from outside. The voice was familiar to me. I looked, and it was Aghormani. She entered through the eastern door like an intoxicated person with disheveled hair, staring eyes, and the end of her cloth, the sari that is, trailing on the ground. She was completely oblivious of her surroundings. Sri Ramakrishna was then seated on his small cot. Excuse me. And now comes this intensification of this divine Leela. So Aghormani Devi comes in this state. Seeing her, Sri Ramakrishna goes into divine ecstasy. So now let's look at what's going on. The master, this is again Golapma saying, the master in the meantime entered into an ecstatic mood. Aghormani sat beside him. Tears were flowing profusely from her eyes. And the master sat beside him and, like a child, sat on her lap. So just imagine, this is 1884. Aghormani Devi is 62. Sri Ramakrishna is 48. And this 48-year-old man sitting on the lap of a 62-year-old woman. Not only that, Golapma is astounded because Sri Ramakrishna never ever touched a woman before. And she says this, I I was astounded, for never before had I seen the master touching a woman. So, just imagine this situation. And then, after some time, Sri Ramakrishna regains his normal consciousness and he goes back to his cot. But Aghormoni Devi is still ecstatic. And she's so joyful that she starts dancing. And she starts this very famous song, Brahma nache, Vishnu nache, Ar nache, Shiv, Gokule Goala nache. So basically, this ecstatic mood continues until some time Sri Ramakrishna is able to bring her down to a lower level of consciousness. And all this time, while she's dancing, she is feeding Sri Ramakrishna, she can of course feel this Gopal, but more importantly, she's saying, oh, this Gopal, it now entered you, you meaning Sri Ramakrishna. Oh, Gopal, it's now come out of you. So, in a way, she felt that Sri Ramakrishna and Gopal, they are one and the same. So her Ishtam was Gopal, as we know. With this experience, she was convinced, absolutely convinced, that Sri Ramakrishna and this Gopal are one and the same. And actually, it's from that day onwards that Sri Ramakrishna gave her the name Gopaler Ma. That means in Bengali, the mother of Gopal. But as you can see, mother of Gopal, meaning not that she had a son named Gopal, but this was the Ishtam Gopal. And just a personal note, I had heard of Gopaler Ma from my mother when I was a kid. Only much, much later did I realize that this lady, Gopaler Ma, was actually Aghormoni Devi. So in Bengal, even today, I can guarantee a lot of people, they don't know of Aghormoni Devi. They know all of Gopaler Ma. So Gopaler Ma is such a common name or such a common personality. Anyway, so now Gopaler Ma has this strong experience. Sri Ramakrishna, as I said, tries to bring her down to a lower level of consciousness. He says, well, please go and take a bath and have lunch and take rest. And then he wanted actually Gopaler Ma to stay that night in the Dakshineshwar, but Gopaler Ma refuses. She says, no, I have to go home. And then she says, when I am about to go home, this Gopal comes out of Sri Ramakrishna and again wants me to lift him up. And in that same pose, she starts now walking back to her home. So this kind of intense association with Gopal continues. And she did come to Dakshineshwar a few more times. In fact, one time she came and she started telling Sri Ramakrishna of these experiences with Gopal. Now you can imagine this Gopal, a 10-month-old baby, and a 10-month-old baby, if you talk to their mothers, they will say they never rest for a moment. So it was exactly the same with Gopal. So she could forget about her japam. She could not do anything, in fact. But Gopal was also very helpful. How so? She herself says, Gopaler Ma says that she went to collect firewood and dried leaves, and she would go collect something and put it in a stack, and she would see Gopal doing the same thing. So Gopal is helping her collect firewood. So that intense degree of association. So she tries to tell these experiences to Sri Ramakrishna, and Sri Ramakrishna says, don't tell this to me. Why? Because Sri Ramakrishna's excuse is that if you do so, you will, the intensity of those experiences will decrease. So for your personal selfish reason, you shouldn't do. So, and she's very naive, very, whatever Sri Ramakrishna would say, she would accept. But then we get a very interesting story. So one day it so happened that Naren, later on to become Swami Vivekananda, Gopaler Ma and Sri Ramakrishna are in the same room. Sri Ramakrishna tells to Gopaler Ma, why don't you tell Naren your experiences? And she says, well, you forbade me to do so. So Sri Ramakrishna says, no, you can tell it to Naren. And Sri Ramakrishna's reason was kind of not very innocent. He knew that Naren coming from the Brahmo Samaj, he's very much against these kinds of experiences. He didn't believe in them. So he says to Gopal Irma, why don't you say this experience? Now, Gopal Irma starts. She recounts one experience. She recounts another. And then she says to Noreen, well, you are very learned. You are very educated. You are very smart. I am just a poor woman. Tell me, these experiences, do you think they are mithya? And Noreen, after listening to these experiences, he becomes so emotional that he has tears in his eyes, and he says, no, mother, your experiences are perfectly fine. Don't you ever think that they are not real. So, and then after a few days, the other very important Leela, she, as I said, she now, whenever she comes, she stays in the Nahobot. Nahobot is, as Prithvi showed us picture and told us last time, Nahobot is where the Holy Mother stayed. So one day, Gopal Irma, she was in the Nahobot. She sat outside the Nahobot courtyard and she was counting her beads. And that was very typical of her. Wherever she would go, sometime she would start counting her beads. So she is counting her beads, and suddenly she opens her eyes and she sees Sri Ramakrishna in front of him. And Sri Ramakrishna asks a very, very strange question. I mean, we know Sri Ramakrishna, whatever we have read and heard about him. He says, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this japa so intensely? And Aghormani Devi has no answer really. She says, why do you ask something like this? So Sri Ramakrishna says that the reason you were doing all this japam, you have achieved that goal. Now what is the point in doing this japam? So she says, you think so? Sri Ramakrishna says, yes. So she says, oh, do you think I have attained everything? Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, you have attained everything. Again she asks 3 times, Amar shob hoyeche, Baba amar shob hoyeche. And 3 times Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, you have attained the goal for which you were doing all this japam. You don't have to do this japam anymore, but pointing towards his body, Sri Ramakrishna's body, he says, for this, if you want to carry on the japam, you can continue. So Gopal Irma says, okay, from now on, I will do japam only for you, and I don't have this need for this japamala. She throws it in the Ganges. And we fast forward. Now, a few more months have passed, and gradually, I would say, Gopal Irma sees a lessening of this intense spiritual experience, and she is very concerned that this intense association with Gopal is not so strong anymore. So she's very concerned. She goes to Sri Ramakrishna again, and Sri Ramakrishna says, yes, that is good, because in today's age, you cannot be in that state for too long, because then your body will not be able to cope up with it. So this is good in a way. But she says, not to Sri Ramakrishna, but later on, that this separation, I mean, it was not really a separation, it was a decrease in intensity, but she felt it to be a separation. And her words are, this separation is like somebody with a buzzsaw kind of cleaving through my chest. So intense was her pain. Okay, now let us look at one story, one incident. Sri Ramakrishna, this is, again, Prithvish talked about Balaram Boshu, to whose house Sri Ramakrishna visited more than 100 times. Balaram Boshu's house, they used to, there was a big festival they did during Rath, the Rath Jatra, the car festival. So this is 1885, Ulto Rath. I mean, Rath is actually, it's 2 festivities. One when Jagannath goes to his aunt's place, and then one when he returns. So this is the return visit, Balaram Boshu's house. Sri Ramakrishna has come. He he'll stay in that house for a few days. So the first morning, he talks to the other kind of householders who have gathered. He talks about Gopaler Ma and he says, do you see that lady of Kamarhati? What wonderful devotion. And he's singing paeans to her devotion. And then he implicitly says to Balaram, is there any way we can bring her? And Balaram Boshu immediately sends a person. So, and then after lunch, Sri Ramakrishna rests. Late afternoon, early evening, the people have gathered. Sri Ramakrishna is sitting and the people are expecting him to speak. He is silent. And not only silent, suddenly Sri Ramakrishna gets into this pose. The Gopal pose, where the knees on the ground, one hand raised, one hand kind of in a posture of getting something. And people are kind of mystified, what's going on? And at that very moment, they hear the sound of this horse carriage come, and Gopaler Ma alights from it. She comes to this room. So people now understand, they can connect. And when Gopaler Ma sees Sri Ramakrishna, I thought that she would be ecstatic. But she says, Ore Baba, what is this? I don't like my Gopal like this. Because Sri Ramakrishna is kind of in a statuesque pose. He's not moving at all. She says, my Gopal, he runs around. He makes all kinds of naughty things. This kind of statue Gopal, I don't like. So, very, very funny incident in a way. And the part of Sri Ramakrishna's training, now what happens is, they have had these 2 days of Ulto Roth, time to go back. Sri Ramakrishna and Gopaler Ma, they are in the same boat that will take them from Calcutta to Dakshineshwar. And the Balaram Bose family, they knew of Gopaler Ma's penury. They knew that she was that she needed things, so they gave her some things, a little bit of clothes, a little bit of utensils in a small sack. So Gopaler Ma takes this sack, gets into the boat, keeps it near her feet, and there are a few others in the boat. So Sri Ramakrishna looks at Gopaler Ma, looks at the sack, and asks somebody, whose sack is it? And they say it's Gopaler Ma's. And Sri Ramakrishna doesn't again look at Gopaler Ma. He kind of says, well, renunciation is the biggest virtue. You have to be dependent on Lord alone. You cannot think of worldly possessions, this, that. So Gopaler Ma gets the message that something is not right. And she says, I thought of just dumping the sack in the Ganges, but anyway, she resists somehow. And once the boat lands at Dakshineshwar, what do? When you have a spiritual question, we said, we go to your guru. If you have a problem with the guru, then to whom do you go to? And the answer, of course, is you go to your mother. Now, in this case, we have to keep in mind that Gopaler Ma used to call Sri Ramakrishna as her son, Amar Gopal, my son Gopal, and the Holy Mother as Boma. Boma is a very endearing term that Bengalis use for daughter-in-law. So the Holy Mother is actually her daughter-in-law, but she goes to the Holy Mother as her mother. Gopal is Ma's mother. And she goes to the Holy Mother and says, Amar Gopal, my Gopal is angry at me for this. What do? You just distribute these things. I cannot tolerate this kind of angry face of Gopal. And Holy Mother, again, what does she say? She says, Uni bolung reja. If he says something, let him say that. You need this thing. People have given it to you as an act of love. You cannot just dump all this or not take this. You should take this. And Gopaler Ma is now a little reassured. And she says, okay, Boma, just give a little bit of this and the rest I will take. But I do have to go to Gopal and apologize. So she goes to Gopal, which means Sri Ramakrishna. But Sri Ramakrishna is now completely in a different mood. He has absolutely, he talks with her in the normal way. So things are wonderful. Okay. Then comes, all right, 8:10. So we will move forward to, as I said, when they that means Govinda Datta's widow and Aghormoni Devi, when they first went to meet Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar, the landlady, Govinda Datta's widow, she invited Sri Ramakrishna to visit her temple house, and Sri Ramakrishna agreed at that time. So now is the time when Sri Ramakrishna visits this house, and Gopalir Ma, she begs for food, she makes all kinds of preparations, she's so happy, and after lunch, she kind of made the bed, with whatever meager belongings she had, she made the bed for Sri Ramakrishna to rest. With Sri Ramakrishna that day came Rakhal, Swami Brahmananda later on. So Rakhal and Sri Ramakrishna, they are in this room. Rakhal falls asleep. Sri Ramakrishna is just about to fall asleep when he hears a strange smell. So he tries to find what's the problem, and then he sees something which, as I said, is related to today's date. He kind of sees two skeletons in a way. Sri Ramakrishna's words were society, and Sri Ramakrishna's language is kind of difficult to decipher. But basically, he tells Rakhal, nobody else. He just wakes up Rakhal and says, Rakhal, we have to go. And he doesn't tell Gopalir Ma anything. And he leaves, and then he tells Rakhal, there were these two skeletons, and they told me that they were having a lot of pain, so they asked me not to stay there, so I left. But we know that Gopalir Ma knew that her house was infested or infected, or whatever word you want to use, with ghosts. She knew that. Why do I say so? We have the recount of an attendant later on who came to that house, and that attendant, he kind of had maybe a little bit of a spooky experience or whatnot, and he asked Gopalir Ma, there are these ghosts staying in your house, aren't you afraid? And she said, why should I be afraid? I have my Gopal, so I know they stay, they don't bother me, I don't bother them. So the point being that she knew. Okay, now this is late 1885. This is kind of towards the end of the Leela with Sri Ramakrishna, because as Prithvish told us last week, very soon Sri Ramakrishna would be going to Shampukur, and Gopalir Ma, as best as we know, did not come to the Shampukur house. So this is towards the end of Sri Ramakrishna's stay in Dakshineshwar. What happens now is that Gopalir Ma is very friendly with Holy Mother. She loves Holy Mother, calls her her daughter-in-law. But she sees and she kind of gets this feeling from Holy Mother that the Holy Mother is unable to see Sri Ramakrishna. Now, it might sound very ludicrous that she is in the Nahabot, he is in this, very close, and yet she couldn't see Sri Ramakrishna. But believe it or not, during the last phase of Sri Ramakrishna's stay in Dakshineshwar, so many people would visit him and as we know, Holy Mother was so shy that she wouldn't come out in the open, so she would have to have the perfect moment when nobody was around. And in spiritual life, we are asked to be selfless, but spiritual practices can also become selfish. I'll give you just one example. Another disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, very, very close disciple, very close friend of the Holy Mother as well, she, one day, Holy Mother said to her, please take this food that I prepared for Sri Ramakrishna, take it to him. And she goes and she starts chatting with Sri Ramakrishna. They have a long conversation. And Holy Mother is waiting for this lady to return so that they can have their dinner together. And this practice goes on day after day. So much so that Sri Ramakrishna now tries to tell this lady, look here, it's not a very good idea for you to bring the food. And she doesn't listen. She says, no, Holy Mother told me she is fine. So the point that I'm trying to make is that Holy Mother was finding it very difficult to have any time with Sri Ramakrishna. And this lady who stays far, far away, she noticed it. And so we have this very wonderful recounting that she would, whenever she would come to Dakshineshwar, whenever she saw nobody in Sri Ramakrishna's room, she would drag Holy Mother with her. Boma, let's go to meet Sri Ramakrishna. And then one day, when she brought Holy Mother to Sri Ramakrishna's room, she says to both of them that the face of the two of you together is just like heaven. So the point being that she was one of the very few disciples who was so considerate, not only of Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, but went outside of her domain to try to get them some meeting time. All right. So then we move now to the time after Sri Ramakrishna left his physical body. She would visit the Boranagar ashram. Again, Prithvi showed us some pictures of the Boranagar ashram. So there was one very inspiring incident. This is not in the Boranagar Mott, but it was during that time. This is in Balaram Boshu's house. Two ladies, they came to Balaram Boshu's house, and Swami Vivekananda was there, and they asked Swami Vivekananda to initiate them. And because Gopal Irma was there at the time, Swami Vivekananda told her, Gopal Irma, why don't you initiate? And Gopal Irma would just not agree. She would say, who am I to initiate? Why are you asking me? So she tried her best not to. But as we know, Swamiji is not somebody who will let this go easily. So he also persevered, and finally Gopal Irma relented. And Swamiji said, well, just initiate them in your Ishta Gopal Mantram. How difficult is that? So she does it. And as you know, there's a tradition with initiation that after initiation you give what is known as Guru Dakshina. You give some offering to the Guru. So she's unwilling to accept it. Again, kind of fight ensues, and finally she accepts. And then she says something. She says to these two ladies, look here, you have come for initiation, that's wonderful. But initiation is not a matter of joke. From now on, whenever you sit down for japam, do it at least 10,000 times. 10,000 times. And I am reminded of a story that one of the Swamis in India, he told me once. He said, nowadays when people come to us for initiation, we say, well, this mantra that we are giving you, please recite 108 times at least in the morning and in the night. And people say, we don't have the time for 108 times japam. And this lady tells them 10,000 times in each session. And then she says, even if there is somebody born in the house or somebody dies in that house, you should not get up from your seat until and unless you have done this japam 10,000 times. So one can imagine her intensity. Okay, so now we come to, because we are looking at the clock all the time, we come to 1902. As I said, she was born in 1822, so she is in her, in a way, 9th decade. Her health is not very good. And when the news comes that Swami Vivekananda has also left his physical body. She is extremely, extremely distressed. She is unable to control herself. She falls down and she breaks her arm. So now she needs an attendant. And it is this attendant's story about the ghost in the house that I talked about. And now comes the time when what happens is that because she is so old and so frail, Swami Sardananda, he takes the decision that she should not stay alone. So they first bring her to Balaram Bosh's house, but after a few days, Sister Nivedita, she decides to bring Gopal Ma to her house in Bagh Bajar. And so she brings Gopal Ma to her house. This is that very famous picture. This is, of course, Sister Nivedita. This is Gopal Ma, and this lady with the hand fan, her name is Kusuma, an attendant. But keep in mind, this is the time when Sister Nivedita's financial situation wasn't that great either. We read that it took Sister Nivedita 18 rupees per month to maintain Gopal Ma. In those days, 18 rupees per month was kind of a princely sum. And Sister Nivedita's money basically came from Sarabul. But anyway, the point being that Nivedita went through a lot of financial hurdles, but she took this decision to bring Gopal Ma to her house. And now it's kind of getting towards the point where everybody starts to realize that these are the last days of Gopal Ma. This is 1908, by the way, 1908, May, June. So things are, her health is deteriorating fast. Now it's the time for what we say in Leela, Anta Leela. Anta Leela means the last kind of act before the curtain is drawn. So she is very sick. She is in Nivedita's house. And Bagh Bajar, Nivedita's house was very close to the Holy Mother's house. Holy Mother would come to visit Gopal Ma often, but this is kind of the last visit. So Holy Mother comes. And as I have said before, Gopal Ma used to call Holy Mother Boma because Sri Ramakrishna was her son Gopal. Now when she comes, she says, Gopal, Ishicho, Gopal, have you come? So now she's seeing Gopal in the Holy Mother. So then Holy Mother takes her head, Gopal Ma's head on her lap and massages her body. And she says, Gopal, I have taken you in my arms so many times. Now the time has come for you to take me in your arms. So Holy Mother, of course, is also in a very, very somber mood. And then Gopal Ma, she's trying to say something. She's looking at the earth. Holy Mother is unable to understand. But Kusum, this lady that you see with the fan, she understands. She knows that what she's trying to say is, I want to take the dust off your feet. So Kusum then goes to the Holy Mother and takes a little bit of the dust and then massages it all over Gopal Ma's body. And now it's July, early July 1908. Her health has really broken down. People now know that it's just a matter of days. So in those days, with Brahmins especially, she was from a Brahmin family, there used to be a tradition called Antarjali Jatra, which basically means that when you are on your deathbed, the last moments, you are not dead yet, but in the last moments, they would take this body, the body still alive, on a cot, and they would take it to the Ganges. And the idea being that if your feet are wet with Ganges water at the point of death, your soul will be liberated and all that. So Nivedita, she decides to take Gopal Irma now to Shobha Bajar Rajbari. Shobha Bajar Rajbari is very close to Bagh Bajar where this house is. And this Rajbari is also on the Ganges. It has a ghat which leads to the Ganges. So they take her, Gopal Irma, and they bring her to this Ganges last moment. So let us read now Nivedita's rendering of this account. So this is July 7th, 1908. There she lay, the last changed breaths coming at easy intervals, while one of the monks, whom she had known as boys, bent over her, and with his brow to hers, half spoke, half whispered the words that the Hindu loves to hear in his last hour, Om Ganga Narayana, Om Ganga Narayana Brahma. A moment more, and then with one voice from the circle of watchers came the shout of Hari Bol, for the last breath had gone. The spirit of Gopal Irma had taken flight, and only the garment of flesh was left behind. Then one at the head of the bier, looking up at the brightening of the sky behind the clouds. So this is early morning, what we call the Brahma Muhurta. Looking up at the brightening of the sky behind the clouds, asked, "Is this the dawn?" And from the foot came back the answer, "Yes, it is the dawn." And then, looking down, we saw that the waters that had bathed the feet of the dying were already receding, were already sunken some inches below us. Gopal Irma had died indeed at the moment of dawn, on the very turn of the outgoing tide. So with that, the divine Leela of Gopal Irma comes to an end. She had very meager belongings, but she had said that whatever I have, please give it to Kusum. So when the time comes to kind of give that, there is this rosary that she had, the Rudraksha Mala that she had. Sister Nivedita insists on taking that. She says, "Kusum, you have all the other things, but I will like to take this rosary." And she used to wear it also. So with that, as I said, we let us try to have our spiritual practices, our japam, our meditation be inspired by this life. Thank you.
So Kalanda, thank you so much for bringing to life, so to speak, the life of Aghormani Devi. We are skipping questions. Maybe we can ask after the class, since he has already taken his seat. And he said, that the life of Gopal Irma is really so awe-inspiring, and let us pray that it inspires every spiritual aspirant and all of us in our journey. It's so full of enigma, intensity, and mysticism. A wonderful life indeed, and once again, thank you, Professor Sengupta. Professor Sengupta will again present the upcoming talk on Tuesday, and that will be on another very special devotee of that we find in Sri Ramakrishna's divine play. Her name is Gauri Ma. Other than that, all regular programs will go on as usual. Coming Friday, Shrikant will give the third of his series of talks on pilgrimages, outer and inner. And on Sunday, Trudip Roy will be giving the Sunday service talk. The title is Sister Nivedita. This is the 150th birth anniversary year of Sister Nivedita, so that will be a special lecture on that occasion.
27th October.
What was her birthday, and this whole year is actually celebrated as her 150th anniversary. And then the prayers and meditations and everything goes on. This Saturday from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. is the day-long meditation, and also the special monthly children's program on Sunday. And of course, you know about the spiritual retreat on December 2nd, for which we have to register. So now we'll conclude with the closing prayers.